I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur, but I never thought it would be like this. My journey to building a successful business was full of setbacks, failures, and moments where I questioned everything. But looking back, those challenges are the reason I'm where I am today. It all started in my freshman year of college. I had this obsession with technology and gadgets. I wasn't the smartest in my classes, but I had a burning desire to make something that could change people's lives. I would spend hours after class learning about coding, app development, and anything that could push me closer to creating something groundbreaking. But as most college students know, money is tight. So, I got a part-time job at a local electronics store to pay for my expenses. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me access to all sorts of gadgets, and most importantly, it gave me insight into what people wanted and needed. I would often overhear customers talking about how they couldn't find affordable accessories for their phones or laptops, and I saw an opportunity. At the time, the market was flooded with overpriced, low-quality phone cases and accessories. I thought, why not create a brand that provides high-quality tech accessories at an affordable price? I didn't have a lot of money saved up, but I did have a solid idea and a network of classmates who were willing to help. I convinced a few friends from college who were great with design and marketing to help me launch a small online store. We had no experience in e-commerce, but we were determined. Our first product was a custom-designed phone case, and we sold it through social media ads and word of mouth. To say the launch was a disaster would be an understatement. Our website crashed the moment we posted the link on Instagram, and when it finally went live, the product photos were grainy, the descriptions were sloppy, and we didn't even have a proper payment gateway set up. We had a few people try to buy, but we had no idea how to fulfill orders. Most importantly, we had no idea how to deal with the logistics of running an online business. But we were stubborn. After the first few failed attempts, we took a step back, reevaluated everything, and started learning. We watched YouTube tutorials, read ebooks, and asked for advice from anyone who would listen. Slowly but surely, we learned how to set up a proper website, improve our photography, and most importantly, handle shipping and customer service. It wasn't glamorous, but it was working. After 6 months of constant tweaking and refining, we started seeing some traction. We had our first real sale on Black Friday, and it felt like a huge win. From there, the business grew slowly but steadily. We expanded our product range to include laptop accessories, charging cables, and even a few quirky tech gadgets. It wasn't exactly what I envisioned in the beginning, but it was enough to keep us afloat. However, there was a turning point. About a year into the business, we hit a plateau. Sales were no longer growing at the rate they used to, and we were stuck in a cycle of barely making a profit. We knew we had to do something drastic if we were going to survive. I thought back to that moment when I overheard customers in the store complaining about overpriced products. What if we could do something even more disruptive? What if we could take the luxury out of tech products and create something that was truly affordable? That's when I made the decision to pivot. I decided to stop focusing on just selling tech accessories and start creating my own line of high-quality, affordable gadgets. I knew it would be risky, but I felt like it was the next logical step for the business. The first product we launched was a wireless charger. We spent months designing it, making sure it was sleek, efficient, and affordable. I used all the knowledge I had gained from watching customer trends and doing research, and we carefully chose a supplier that wouldn't charge us an arm and a leg for manufacturing. We were ready to take on the world. When the charger finally launched, I was terrified. We were putting everything we had into this new product. The marketing was more aggressive than anything we'd done before, and we had a better website design. The results were immediate. The first week, we sold over 500 units. It was an amazing feeling, but also terrifying because we knew we had to keep that momentum going. Over the next few months, we expanded our product line even further. We started selling Bluetooth speakers, portable chargers, and even noise-canceling headphones. Each product was carefully crafted with quality and affordability in mind. Slowly, our brand started gaining traction. We weren't just another e-commerce store selling cheap knockoffs. We were offering products that were comparable to high-end brands, but at a fraction of the price. Then came the breakthrough moment. One of our products, a sleek and affordable pair of wireless earbuds, went viral on social media. We were getting mentions from tech influencers, and customers started posting rave reviews online. The word-of-mouth marketing took off, and our sales skyrocketed. It was as if everything we had worked for finally paid off. That was just the beginning. With the success of the wireless earbuds, we attracted the attention of larger retailers. We started getting offers to distribute our products in physical stores. This was something I never imagined, and it was both exciting and overwhelming. But we knew we had to stay focused. We expanded our team, built better supply chain relationships, and focused on delivering exceptional customer service. By the time we celebrated our third anniversary, our company had grown exponentially. We were no longer just an online store. We had become a recognized brand in the tech world. We had a team of over 50 employees, and our products were available in stores nationwide. We were on track to hit $10 million in revenue for that year. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far we've come. The road wasn't easy. We faced setbacks, financial struggles, and moments when I thought we might not make it. But each failure taught us something valuable, and each small win pushed us forward. I never thought I'd be here, running a company with a successful product line, but I'm proud of what we've accomplished. Being an entrepreneur is never a straight path, and it's never as glamorous as it looks from the outside. It's a constant grind of learning, adapting, and growing. But for anyone out there thinking of starting their own business, I'd say this: don't be afraid of failure. Embrace it, learn from it, and always keep moving forward. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I had always been that person who hated the conventional path. You know, the one everyone tells you to follow: get good grades, get a degree, find a stable job, and slowly climb the corporate ladder. But for me, none of that ever felt right. I wasn't chasing the money, the accolades, or the so-called security that came with the 9-to-5 grind. No, what I craved was freedom. The freedom to decide what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, and most importantly, the freedom to fail and learn from it without being judged. It all started back in my senior year of college. I was studying business, but I felt disconnected from what I was learning. Every lecture about marketing strategies, finance, or management seemed dry and far removed from the hustle and innovation I saw outside the classroom. The world was moving fast, tech was exploding, e-commerce was reshaping industries, and everyone seemed to be talking about side hustles. That's when I decided I wasn't going to wait around for my degree to tell me who I was. I would figure it out myself. I began my entrepreneurial journey with nothing but a laptop, a couple $100s I had saved up from part-time jobs, and an obsession with one thing: helping small businesses establish a presence online. I'd spent months learning everything I could about website design, digital marketing, and social media strategies. My friends thought I was crazy. Why was I spending so much time on something that didn't guarantee any results? But I believed in it. I believed that businesses, especially small, local ones, were missing out on something huge by not taking advantage of the digital landscape. The first step was to build a portfolio. I reached out to local businesses around my college town, offering to redesign their websites or create social media campaigns for free. At first, I got a lot of no's, and the rejection was brutal. But then, finally, a small coffee shop agreed to let me help them with their online presence. I redesigned their website, set up their Google My Business page, and taught them how to leverage Instagram to get more customers. It wasn't groundbreaking work, but it was enough to show them results. In a matter of weeks, their foot traffic increased, and the owner was thrilled. That project, small as it was, gave me the confidence to take things further. I started cold emailing more businesses, offering my services for a small fee. Some were interested, others weren't. But each yes pushed me further, and by the end of that semester, I had a handful of clients, all small businesses looking to boost their online presence. I didn't make much money in the beginning, maybe a couple $1,000s over a few months. But that wasn't the point. The point was I was building something of my own. I wasn't dependent on anyone else's timeline. As my business grew, I realized I needed help. I couldn't juggle everything on my own, especially as the workload began to pile up. So, I brought on a couple of freelancers I had met through online communities. I started with one web designer and a social media manager. We worked remotely, communicating through Slack, Zoom, and email. It was a small team, but it felt like we were on the cusp of something big. The more I worked, the more I learned, and the more my clients seemed to trust me. But then came a setback that almost made me quit altogether. One of my clients, a local retail store, had been one of my biggest successes. We had completely revamped their online store, increased their social media presence, and seen their sales double within the first month. I was riding high on this win when suddenly, out of nowhere, I received an email from the store owner. They were terminating our contract. No explanation, no warning, just, we've decided to go in a different direction. I was crushed. I had poured my heart into that project, and it felt like a personal rejection. At that moment, I doubted everything. Was I cut out for this? Was I just chasing a pipe dream? The thought of going back to a regular job crossed my mind. I even updated my LinkedIn, half-heartedly searching for job opportunities. But something in me refused to give up. I took a couple of days to regroup, reassess my approach, and push through the doubts. I learned a valuable lesson from that failure. I couldn't rely on just one client, no matter how big or successful. I needed to diversify my income streams and build a brand that could weather the storm of setbacks. I pivoted my focus. Instead of offering just website design and social media management, I expanded my services to include search engine optimization, SEO, and paid advertising. I also started a blog to establish my authority in the industry and attract clients organically. It was a long road, but slowly, things started to pick up again. Clients came, some big, some small, but each project pushed me closer to my ultimate goal, building a business that could support itself without me working 24/7. By the time I graduated, my business was thriving. I had a steady stream of clients, a team of remote workers, and an income that was far more than what any entry-level job could offer. It wasn't easy. There were nights I stayed up late working on proposals, days I questioned my decisions, and times I had to navigate tough conversations with clients. But every single one of those challenges taught me something. What I didn't expect, however, was the realization that came a few years later. I didn't want to just run a digital marketing agency. I wanted to create something bigger, something that could scale beyond my own time and effort. That's when I got the idea for my next venture, an online education platform aimed at helping aspiring entrepreneurs and small business owners learn the ins and outs of digital marketing. I spent months designing the curriculum, reaching out to instructors, and building the platform. The first year was rough, with slow sales and a lot of experimentation. But by the second year, it began to gain momentum. The first group of students who took the course left rave reviews, and their success stories helped the business grow. Eventually, I found myself with a business that not only generated income for me, but also had a profound impact on the lives of others. Today, I'm still learning and growing. I no longer have to hustle for every project or chase every new business opportunity. I've built a brand that can run without my constant involvement. The freedom I once sought is now a reality. And while there are still days when the weight of responsibility feels heavy, I remind myself that I built this from nothing, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. Looking back, I can see how much I've changed. I'm not the same person I was when I graduated college. I've learned to embrace failure, to celebrate small wins, and to constantly adapt. Entrepreneurship isn't easy, but it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. And if you're someone who feels like the traditional path isn't for you, I can tell you this. There's always a way to carve your own path. It might not be easy, and it might take longer than you expect, but if you're willing to put in the work, the rewards can be life-changing. I never planned to start a business. In fact, I had no real interest in entrepreneurship until one late night in college, when I found myself sitting at my computer, staring at a bank statement that made my stomach drop. It was the last semester of my senior year, and I had been living paycheck to paycheck for months, juggling part-time jobs, student loans, and a mounting sense of anxiety. But that night, something clicked. I knew I had to make a change. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life grinding away at a 9-to-5 job, barely making ends meet. I wanted more. At the time, I was majoring in computer science. It wasn't exactly a field I loved, but I was good at it, and my parents had always told me to pick a stable career. But here I was, in the final stretch of my college journey, feeling the weight of those decisions. I wasn't passionate about the tech world, but I was good at solving problems, and that skill would later prove to be one of my greatest assets. I didn't know what the future held, but I was determined to find out. I started researching business ideas at odd hours, scrolling through Reddit threads, reading success stories, and watching YouTube videos of successful entrepreneurs talking about their journeys. One evening, I came across a story about a college dropout who built a seven-figure business by selling products online. The more I read about this, the more I realized I could do something similar. But I had no money to invest in inventory or advertising. So, I started small, too small actually. I decided to create and sell digital products. One of the first things I made was a set of downloadable design templates for social media posts. I thought they would be useful to small businesses, bloggers, and anyone who needed a quick way to create professional-looking content without hiring a designer. The idea seemed simple enough, but I had no clue about how to market my product or find customers. I created a simple website using a template I found online and set up a store on Etsy. I didn't expect much, but I told myself that if I could make just a few sales, I'd consider it a success. For weeks, my store was practically invisible. I had no social media following, and my website traffic was minimal. I had made a grand total of 0 sales. But instead of giving up, I started to experiment. I posted my templates on social media, joined Facebook groups related to business owners and entrepreneurs, and connected with others who might need my product. Slowly but surely, things started to pick up. I started getting messages from people asking for custom designs, and before I knew it, I was making my first real sales. By the time graduation came around, I had made a few $1,000s. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to prove that I could make something work. I knew I was onto something, and I made a decision that would shape my future. I wasn't going to take the traditional job offer I had lined up. Instead, I was going to go all in on my digital product business. I continued selling templates and digital designs for months, but the business model felt limiting. I was working long hours, creating new designs, and handling customer service, but I was still tied to the grind. It wasn't scalable, and I realized that if I wanted to grow, I needed to pivot. That's when I decided to launch an online course. I had learned a lot about creating digital products and marketing them, and I knew there were others who would benefit from that knowledge. So, I poured my heart into creating a course that taught people how to build their own online businesses, just like I had done. I launched the course on a whim, not expecting much. But to my surprise, it took off. Within the first month, I had made more money than I had in the previous 6 months combined. I spent the next year focusing entirely on my online business. I scaled my course, offered additional resources like ebooks and templates, and built an email list. The success didn't come without its challenges. There were days when I doubted myself and wondered if I was doing the right thing. I often felt overwhelmed by the pressure of being the sole person in charge of everything: marketing, sales, customer service, content creation. There were moments when I thought about quitting and finding a real job. But every time I hit a roadblock, I reminded myself of why I started in the first place. I wanted the freedom to create something on my own terms. I also realized that success wasn't just about the money, it was about the impact I was making. The emails and messages I received from students and customers who had transformed their lives using my course were what kept me going. One woman, a stay-at-home mom, wrote to tell me that my course had allowed her to launch her own online store and quit her part-time job. Another person shared that they had used my templates to build a successful social media marketing agency. As the business grew, I reinvested the profits into advertising, expanding my team, and developing new products. I hired a small group of talented individuals to help with content creation, customer support, and marketing, and I made it a point to always listen to feedback from my community. Fast forward to today, and I am running a 7-figure business. My courses have helped thousands of people build their own online businesses, and I've learned more than I ever imagined about what it takes to succeed. But it hasn't been an easy road. There have been moments of doubt, frustration, and failure. But I've come to realize that failure is a part of the process. It's the only way to grow. I still remember the moment when I took that leap of faith after graduation. I had no idea what would happen, but I'm grateful every day that I didn't take the safe route. My journey hasn't been perfect, but it's been mine. And that's something I wouldn't trade for anything. Looking back, I never could have predicted how much my life would change in such a short period of time. I'm living proof that you don't have to follow a traditional path to find success. You just need to be willing to take risks, trust yourself, and keep going even when it feels like you're not getting anywhere. In the end, it's not about how fast you grow, but how much you're willing to learn and adapt. If I had given up when things weren't going well, I wouldn't be where I am today. But instead, I kept going. And now, my life looks nothing like I ever imagined. And I couldn't be happier. It was 2015, and I was just another guy working a dead-end job in corporate America, feeling the weight of each passing day dragging me further away from what I really wanted to do. I had always dreamed of starting my own business, but there was a big gap between my aspirations and the reality of paying bills, keeping my head above water, and trying to build some semblance of a life. My name is Max, and this is the story of how I built my own business from the ground up, stumbled, failed, and ultimately succeeded. At the time, I was working at a mid-sized marketing firm, doing the same repetitive work every single day. I'd help create campaigns for small businesses, write blog posts, manage social media accounts, and deal with clients who were either too demanding or too uninvolved. Despite the paycheck, I was miserable. It wasn't the work itself that was the issue, it was that I knew deep down I was meant for something more. The dream of being an entrepreneur was always with me, sitting there like a burning ember. But the obstacle, of course, was the fear of failure. Like most people, I had bills to pay, student loans to tackle, and a lifestyle to maintain. The idea of quitting my job to go full force into an uncertain venture felt like a reckless move. I was comfortable enough to survive, but not fulfilled. That was the first hurdle, getting over the fear of stepping away from the safety net. I started small. It began with me working on freelance projects outside of my day job. I started designing websites, offering content marketing advice, and running paid ads for local businesses on the side. It wasn't glamorous, and I was working weekends and late nights, but it was a start. Slowly, I built up a modest portfolio. It felt like every gig was a tiny brick in the foundation of something bigger, but there were days when the work felt like it wasn't worth the effort. There were plenty of times I thought about quitting and just taking the comfortable, predictable paycheck. But I had to remind myself of the bigger picture. Then came the breakthrough. After months of networking, hustling, and grinding, I landed a big project. It was a startup that wanted to scale quickly and needed everything from branding to digital marketing. The offer was the biggest I had ever received, and it felt like everything was finally coming together. I quit my day job, with little savings, a few clients lined up, and a head full of dreams. It was the scariest moment of my life. For the first few months, it was incredible. I was working from home, setting my own schedule, and doing the work I loved. The client list grew, and I was able to hire a few contractors to help with the workload. I remember feeling like I had finally unlocked the secret to happiness and success. But things took a turn in 2016, just a year after I made the leap. I had overextended myself. I thought I could handle more clients, more projects, and more responsibilities. I didn't want to say no, because I was so eager to prove that I had what it took. But it quickly became clear that I couldn't keep up. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating well, and the quality of my work started to suffer. Deadlines were missed, clients started to complain, and the stress began to mount. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, thinking about the thousands of dollars I was potentially losing. It got so bad that I started to question everything. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe I should have just stayed in that marketing firm. Maybe my business would crash and burn, and I'd be left with nothing. I reached a breaking point in late 2016 when I almost lost a major client because of an oversight. I had a serious conversation with myself. Was I really going to let this whole thing fall apart? I realized that I needed to slow down and get my head straight. I took a step back and reevaluated everything. I began to prioritize my health and well-being. I started saying no to clients that weren't a good fit, restructured my business, and put processes in place to help manage the workload more effectively. I began delegating tasks, setting more realistic expectations, and seeking help from mentors. That's when I started to understand what it meant to truly run a business. It wasn't just about doing everything yourself. It was about building a team, setting boundaries, and creating systems that could sustain long-term growth. By 2017, I was back on track. My business was growing steadily, and I was learning how to balance the pressures of entrepreneurship with self-care. I invested in software that helped automate some of the tedious tasks, allowing me to focus on strategy and creative work. Slowly but surely, my reputation grew, and I attracted higher-paying clients who valued the quality of my work. However, the real breakthrough came when I finally decided to scale. I hired full-time employees and invested in a small office space. That was when the business started to feel real. The transition from being a solo freelancer to running a team was challenging. I had to learn how to manage people, deal with HR issues, and navigate the complexities of leading a team. But by 2019, things had reached a tipping point. I had a solid client base, a talented team, and a profitable business. It felt surreal. The path to success wasn't easy, and there were plenty of failures along the way. There were months where I doubted myself, moments when I thought about giving up, and setbacks that felt insurmountable. But through perseverance, learning from my mistakes, and surrounding myself with a strong network of people who believed in me, I eventually made it. By 2021, my company had grown to the point where we were working with several Fortune 500 clients. My team had expanded, and we were working on cutting-edge marketing strategies, branding, and digital transformation projects. Looking back, I can hardly recognize the person I was when I first started. What I learned through all of this was that entrepreneurship is not a straight path. It's filled with highs and lows, successes and failures, moments of inspiration and crushing self-doubt. But if you're willing to embrace the struggle, adapt, and learn from every setback, it is possible to turn your dreams into reality. I'll never forget those early days when I was struggling to get clients and feeling like I was on the verge of failure. But I kept going, and I can say now with pride that it was all worth it. Today, my company is thriving, and I'm in a position where I get to mentor other entrepreneurs, share my story, and help them navigate their own journey. Every day is still a challenge, but it's a challenge I'm grateful for. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, know that it's not going to be easy, but it can be incredibly rewarding. Don't be afraid of the hard times, embrace them, learn from them, and keep moving forward. Because if a guy like me, who was stuck in a dead-end job and full of doubt, can turn things around, so can you. I still remember the first time I thought about starting my own business. It was late at night, and I was sitting at my desk at a corporate job I had hated for years. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and my fingers hovered over the keyboard. The spreadsheet in front of me, filled with meaningless numbers, made my mind wander to thoughts of escape. What if I could work for myself? What if I could build something that mattered, something that would allow me to live on my own terms? Those thoughts kept circling in my head like a broken record, but the fear of failure, the comfort of a steady paycheck, and the pressure of responsibility kept me from taking the leap. But then one day it hit me. What was the worst that could happen? If I failed, I would learn. I would be in the same position I was now, but with more experience. What if I succeeded? What if I built something incredible? I decided to take the plunge. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that I needed to make a change. At first, I wasn't sure where to begin. I had no special skills, no money to invest, and no prior business experience. But I had something else, an obsessive drive to make it work. I started reading everything I could about entrepreneurship. I listened to podcasts, watched YouTube videos, and read blogs. I spent countless nights working on ideas, creating plans, and figuring out what might be the right path for me. Eventually, after much thought, I came up with a business idea that seemed like it had potential. I had always been passionate about fitness, so I thought about starting a fitness coaching business. I'd help people get in shape, not just by showing them how to work out, but by giving them the tools to build a sustainable lifestyle around fitness. With that idea in mind, I started to build the foundation of the business. I created a website, developed an online program, and began marketing myself on social media. At first, no one knew who I was. I was just another random person on the internet. But I pushed through. I started reaching out to friends and family to try to get my first clients. Slowly, a few people signed up. They had the same frustrations I had faced, trying to get in shape but always falling off track. The first few months were tough. I spent countless hours working on the business, updating the website, creating content, and responding to messages. I didn't make much money at all. In fact, there were times when I felt like I was putting more into the business than I was getting out of it. But I knew I had to keep going. I had no other choice. This was my shot. Things started to change when I had a breakthrough. One of my clients, a woman who had been struggling with weight loss for years, had been consistently following my program. She sent me a message saying she had lost 15 pounds in just 2 months. That was the moment when everything clicked. It wasn't about just losing weight. It was about changing lives, helping people achieve things they never thought were possible. I started sharing her success story on social media. It went viral. People who had been following me started reaching out for help, and my business began to snowball. I started getting more and more clients, and the more success stories I shared, the more my brand grew. Within a year, I was making more than I ever had at my corporate job. The flexibility, the freedom, and the satisfaction of seeing real change in people's lives made all the hard work worth it. But even with success, there were still challenges. As the business grew, I had to learn how to scale. I hired a few assistants to help with administrative work, but I quickly realized that my business model needed to evolve if I wanted to grow further. I couldn't just keep doing everything myself. I needed systems in place, and I needed to think bigger. I started developing a membership platform where people could access workouts, nutrition plans, and personalized coaching. This allowed me to scale my business without constantly trading time for money. I also worked on automating my marketing through email sequences and social media content that could engage potential clients while I focused on the bigger picture. But with growth came new challenges. The more clients I had, the more complaints and issues I had to handle. There were clients who didn't see results as quickly as they expected, clients who wanted to cancel, and clients who were frustrated by technical issues. It was a stressful time, and I often found myself working 12 to 14-hour days just to keep up with the demands. But I didn't give up. I focused on improving the customer experience, responding quickly to inquiries, and listening to feedback. I also began surrounding myself with a team of experts who could help me manage the workload. Hiring the right people to fill the gaps in my knowledge was a game changer. I brought on a marketing expert, a customer service manager, and a financial advisor to help with the back end of the business. They allowed me to step back from the day-to-day operations and focus on growth and strategy. As time went on, my business continued to expand. I was able to launch a line of fitness apparel, offer one-on-one coaching, and even host fitness retreats. The brand I had created became more than just a business. It became a lifestyle. People didn't just come to me for workouts and nutrition plans. They came for a community, a support system, and a belief that they could achieve their goals. Looking back now, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many times when I felt like giving up, so many moments when I doubted myself. But now, I look at the success I've built and feel a deep sense of pride. I'm no longer just an employee in a cubicle. I'm the CEO of my own company, and I've created something that has had a real impact on people's lives. Starting a business isn't easy. There are highs and lows, moments of doubt, and setbacks. But if you keep pushing forward, if you stay focused on your goals, and if you embrace the challenges along the way, the rewards are beyond what you could ever imagine. Entrepreneurship is not just about making money. It's about creating something meaningful, something that resonates with people, and building a life that you can be proud of. If you're sitting at a desk right now, feeling stuck, I want you to know this. You can do it. The road ahead won't be easy, but if you're willing to work hard and stay persistent, you can build something incredible. Believe in yourself, take the leap, and start working toward your dream today. It's the best decision I've ever made, and I'll never look back. I never thought I'd be where I am today. A few years ago, I was just a regular guy working at a dead-end job, trying to make ends meet. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at the clock, waiting for the day to end so I could go home and just relax. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the life I wanted. The thought of working for someone else for the rest of my life, following their rules, making them rich while I barely scraped by, was something I couldn't shake off. I had dreams, big ones, but I had no idea how to get there. This is the story of how I turned my life around. It all started with a simple idea. One day, while browsing through social media, I saw an ad for a product. It wasn't anything revolutionary, just a basic gadget that promised to make people's lives easier. But for some reason, it caught my attention. I clicked on the link, did a bit of research, and realized that the market for this product was huge. People were desperate for something like this, but there weren't many options available. That's when the light bulb went off. What if I could create my own version of this product, but better? I didn't have any experience in manufacturing, design, or even marketing, but I had a strong desire to change my life. I figured, if I could find a way to create a better product and market it effectively, I could make a lot of money. I didn't know how to get started, but I decided to take the plunge anyway. I started small. I spent hours each day researching everything I could about the industry, the product, and the competition. I watched countless YouTube videos, read blog posts, and joined online forums where people discussed similar ventures. I learned about sourcing materials, working with suppliers, and how to design a product that would stand out. It was overwhelming, but I was determined. I wasn't going to let my lack of experience hold me back. The first big hurdle came when I had to figure out how to manufacture the product. I had no clue where to even begin. I didn't have the funds to start my own factory, and I didn't know any manufacturers personally. So, I turned to Alibaba. It felt like a risky move, but I figured if I was going to do this, I had to take some risks. After weeks of communicating with suppliers, sampling different designs, and negotiating prices, I finally found a manufacturer that seemed trustworthy. But the road wasn't smooth sailing after that. I had to deal with a series of setbacks. The first batch of products was a disaster. The quality wasn't up to par, and I had to send it all back. The manufacturer promised to fix the issues, but that meant more delays. At this point, I was running low on savings, and I was starting to wonder if I had made a huge mistake. But I didn't give up. I was so close, and I couldn't quit now. After several iterations, the product was finally ready. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to sell. I created a website, set up a social media presence, and launched my product. I'll never forget the moment when the first order came in. It was small, but it felt like a victory. I knew that if I could get this first customer, I could get more. I didn't have much of a marketing budget, so I had to get creative. I started reaching out to influencers in the niche, offering them free products in exchange for honest reviews. I ran Facebook ads and Instagram campaigns, targeting specific groups that I knew would be interested in the product. Slowly but surely, sales started to trickle in. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, buying more products, improving my website, and increasing my ad spend. But just as things were starting to look up, I hit another obstacle. The supply chain issues hit hard. The manufacturer I was working with started to experience delays, and I couldn't get the products in time for my customers. I had to keep updating them, apologize, and offer refunds when necessary. It was frustrating, and I started to feel like I was losing control. But I kept pushing forward. I found a new manufacturer, one that was more reliable and better suited to my needs. The transition wasn't easy, but it was necessary. By this time, I had built a small but loyal customer base. People were leaving positive reviews, sharing their experiences, and spreading the word about my product. I started to see more consistent sales, and that gave me the confidence to scale. I hired my first employee, a customer service representative, to help handle the growing demand. I also started to invest more in content marketing, creating helpful blog posts and videos that educated potential customers about my product. With a stronger foundation in place, I began to think bigger. I expanded my product line, offering complementary items that worked well with the original product. This move paid off, and my business began to grow rapidly. The more I learned about marketing and customer acquisition, the more confident I became in my ability to scale. A few years into this journey, I hit my first major milestone. I crossed the six-figure revenue mark. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but it was the validation I needed to know that all the hard work was paying off. I'd gone from being an employee at a job I hated to being the owner of a thriving business. It was surreal. Now, the company is doing better than I ever imagined. We've expanded internationally, and we're working on new products that will make life even easier for our customers. I've been able to hire a team of talented people who are just as passionate about the business as I am. I've traveled to places I only dreamed of, and I've gained a sense of freedom and control over my life that I never thought possible. Looking back, there were countless moments when I could have given up, when I could have let fear and doubt take over. But I didn't. I kept going, even when things were tough. Entrepreneurship isn't for the faint of heart, but if you're willing to put in the work, take risks, and learn from your mistakes, the rewards are worth it. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm a long way from where I started. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that success doesn't come easy. It requires grit, perseverance, and a willingness to fail and get back up again. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: just start. The road will be difficult, but it will also be one of the most rewarding things you ever do. It all started with a side hustle and a burning desire to prove myself. A few years ago, I was working a 9-to-5 job that I hated. I was stuck in the monotony of spreadsheets and emails, my dreams of becoming an entrepreneur only growing as I sat in front of my computer day after day. But at the time, I didn't have the guts to take the leap. I felt stuck, and I knew I needed something to break free. One day, after another frustrating meeting with my boss about something trivial, I decided to stop complaining and start doing something about it. My wife had been on my case for months about the idea of starting a small online business, something I could manage alongside my full-time job. She wasn't wrong, but the idea of failure terrified me. But as I sat there, staring at my computer screen, something clicked. I took a deep breath and started researching. After hours of reading articles, watching videos, and trying to get a sense of what would be profitable in today's market, I stumbled across dropshipping. The idea of running an online store without holding any inventory seemed perfect for someone like me who had little to no startup capital. I didn't need to create my own products, I didn't need a warehouse, and I could manage it all from my couch. I had no idea what I was doing. I spent weeks learning the basics of e-commerce, finding suppliers, and building a website. My first store was a mess. Everything from the product descriptions to the website layout looked amateurish. But I was determined. Every day after work, I would spend hours tweaking the website, testing different products, and running ads. The first month was brutal. I made maybe $100, but that wasn't enough to cover the ads I was paying for. I was losing money, but I wasn't ready to give up yet. I decided to give it another month. Then, out of nowhere, I made my first sale. I remember the moment vividly. I was sitting at my desk after a long day at work, scrolling through my phone, when I saw the email notification. New order $39.99. My heart stopped. I immediately told my wife, who was just as excited as I was. It was a small victory, but it was proof that I was onto something. But the road to success wasn't all smooth sailing. As the months passed, I began to see more sales trickle in. But I also encountered problems I hadn't anticipated. My supplier would sometimes ship products late, leading to angry customers. My ad campaigns would occasionally crash and burn, costing me money with little return. And most of all, I was burned out. Managing a side business while working full-time was exhausting. I would work 40 hours a week at my regular job, then spend another 20 to 30 hours a week managing my store. It felt like I had no time for anything else. One night, after I had spent hours trying to fix an issue with my supplier, I was about ready to quit. I felt like I was chasing a dream that would never come true. But then I remembered something my dad used to tell me. Nothing worth having comes easy. That's when I decided to double down. I took a hard look at my business, figured out what was working, and cut out everything that wasn't. I focused on finding reliable suppliers, improving my website, and creating more targeted ads. Slowly but surely, my store began to pick up. Sales increased, customer satisfaction improved, and I even managed to hire a freelancer to handle some of the customer service. After almost a year of grinding, my side business was finally making more money than my full-time job. It was time to make the leap. I remember the day I walked into my boss's office and handed in my resignation. I was nervous, but also incredibly excited. I had taken the first step toward building something of my own, and there was no turning back. My boss didn't take it well. He tried to convince me to stay, offered me a raise, and promised me more responsibility. But I knew it was time to go. I walked out of that office with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, knowing that my life was about to change forever. For the first few months, I was on cloud nine. I had all the time in the world to focus on my business, and it was thriving. I was able to scale up my ad campaigns, hire a team of virtual assistants, and even branch out into new product categories. But even though I had left my job, the challenges didn't stop. The pressure of keeping the business running was constant. I had to make sure everything was running smoothly, handle customer complaints, manage cash flow, and constantly adapt to market trends. It was like a never-ending game of whack-a-mole. Then, just as things were starting to feel like they were under control, a major setback hit. The platform I was using for my store suddenly changed its policies, making it harder for new stores to advertise effectively. My ads were getting shut down left and right, and my sales plummeted. I spent weeks trying to figure out how to get around the new rules, but it felt like every time I solved one problem, another one would pop up. I was about ready to quit again. But then I had an idea. Maybe it wasn't about relying on one platform. I started exploring other avenues, social media influencers, SEO, email marketing, and even affiliate programs. Slowly, I began diversifying my traffic sources. The results weren't immediate, but after a few months of trial and error, I had a more sustainable marketing strategy in place. It was during this phase that I realized something important. Being an entrepreneur wasn't just about making money. It was about learning, adapting, and evolving. It was about solving problems and overcoming obstacles that seemed insurmountable. And most importantly, it was about building something that could provide value to people. Fast forward to today, and my business is no longer just a side hustle. I have a team of 5 full-time employees, and we've expanded into several product niches. We're no longer reliant on one platform for our traffic, and we've built a loyal customer base. It hasn't been easy, but looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. The journey from working a miserable 9 to 5 job to running my own successful business has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. The biggest lesson I've learned through all of this is that success doesn't come overnight. It takes grit, persistence, and the ability to keep moving forward even when things seem impossible. I've failed, I've struggled, and I've faced more setbacks than I can count. But I've also learned to embrace those challenges, knowing that each one is an opportunity to grow. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, know this. It's going to be hard, and you will want to quit many times along the way. But if you stick with it, keep learning, and stay persistent, there's nothing stopping you from achieving your dreams. Just remember, no one else is going to do the work for you. It's all on you. But when you finally make it, the satisfaction is indescribable. Take the leap. You've got this. It was a quiet Wednesday morning when I stumbled upon the idea that would change my life forever. At the time, I was working as a marketing consultant, stuck in a job that paid the bills but didn't excite me. I had dreams of something bigger, something I could call my own. But like many people, I had no idea what that something was. That morning, while sipping my coffee and scrolling through my phone, I came across a YouTube video about a guy who built a successful online business from scratch. I can't remember his name, but his story resonated with me. He spoke about how he was tired of the traditional 9-to-5 grind and wanted more freedom. At that moment, a light bulb went off in my head. What if I could build something for myself too? The only problem? I had no business experience. I had always been good with people, but when it came to things like setting up websites or dealing with finances, I was clueless. Still, the idea lingered in the back of my mind. I started researching ways to build an online business. I read blog posts, watched videos, and listened to podcasts. Slowly, I began to piece together a plan. After a few weeks of learning, I decided to launch a dropshipping business. I didn't have much money to invest, so I thought this would be a low-risk way to get started. The concept was simple: sell products online without needing to hold inventory. I would set up a website, find a supplier, and start selling. It sounded easy enough, but little did I know, I was about to face a mountain of challenges. The first challenge came when I tried to build my website. I had no idea how to use WordPress, and the process of setting up an e-commerce site felt like trying to decode ancient hieroglyphics. Every tutorial I followed seemed to be incomplete or outdated. I spent hours trying to get my site looking even remotely professional, and by the time I was finished, I felt completely exhausted. But I didn't give up. I knew that if I wanted this to work, I had to push through the tough times. Once the site was live, I moved on to the next challenge: finding products to sell. I scoured various suppliers and stumbled upon a few that seemed promising. I picked a niche, fitness products, and chose a few items to feature on my website. But as soon as I started marketing the products, I realized just how competitive the market was. There were thousands of other people selling the same items, and getting noticed was going to be much harder than I thought. I tried running Facebook ads, Instagram ads, and Google ads, but nothing worked. My return on investment, ROI, was terrible, and I was burning through my small budget quickly. I started to feel like I had made a huge mistake. I spent sleepless nights trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. I kept tweaking my ads, changing my website design, and testing different product combinations, but nothing seemed to move the needle. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, I decided to take a step back and rethink my approach. I realized I had been focusing too much on trying to sell a product to anyone and everyone. I needed to be more targeted. That's when I dug deeper into the psychology of my potential customers. I started to ask myself questions. Who are these people? What are their pain points? What drives them to buy? After some reflection, I changed my focus. Instead of trying to sell generic fitness products to anyone who might be interested, I decided to create a brand that spoke to a specific audience: busy professionals who wanted to stay fit but didn't have hours to spend at the gym. I began creating content around this idea, sharing fitness tips and time-saving strategies. Slowly but surely, people started to take notice. I also made sure to connect with influencers in the fitness space. I reached out to micro-influencers with smaller followings but highly engaged audiences. Many of them agreed to promote my products in exchange for a commission, and this gave my business the credibility it needed. Over time, my sales started to increase. But that wasn't the end of my journey. The next hurdle came when my supplier started experiencing delays. The products I had ordered were stuck in customs, and I had customers waiting for their orders. I remember feeling like the world was crashing down around me. I had worked so hard to get here, and now this. I took a deep breath and called my supplier to see if there was anything I could do to expedite the process. To my surprise, they offered a solution. They could send out replacement products from another warehouse in a different country. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than leaving my customers in the dark. I learned a valuable lesson that day. Things rarely go as planned, and the ability to adapt is what separates successful entrepreneurs from those who give up. By this point, I had gained a small but loyal following, and I decided to reinvest the profits back into the business. I hired a part-time virtual assistant to help with customer service and website maintenance. This freed up my time so I could focus on growing the business even further. A few months later, I realized that my business had outgrown dropshipping. While it had been a great entry point, I was ready to scale. I started sourcing my own products directly from manufacturers and created custom-branded items. The process of handling inventory and fulfillment wasn't easy, but it gave me more control over the quality of my products and customer experience. Fast forward a year, and I had built a business that generated 6 figures in revenue. I was no longer working as a consultant, and I had the freedom to work on my own terms. I had learned that success didn't come overnight. It came from resilience, learning from mistakes, and adapting to changing circumstances. Looking back, I often think about how far I've come. I remember those early days of uncertainty and frustration, but I also remember the excitement of every small victory. Every sale, every customer review, every new follower on social media felt like a step closer to my dream. And now, I can say that I've built something I'm proud of. The road wasn't easy, and there were many times when I felt like giving up. But the one thing I kept reminding myself was that failure isn't final. It's just part of the process. Every setback is an opportunity to learn and grow. And as long as I kept moving forward, I would eventually get to where I wanted to be. So, to anyone out there who feels stuck or unsure about starting a business, I say this: it's going to be tough. There will be moments where you want to quit. But if you stay consistent, keep learning, and adapt when things go wrong, success will come. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. And for me, that's the greatest reward of all. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I never thought I'd become an entrepreneur. I was one of those people who followed the traditional path: school, college, get a job, work my way up the corporate ladder. That's the dream, right? But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. It all started in my mid-20s. I had just landed a decent job in a marketing firm and was doing everything right. I had a steady paycheck, a nice office, and a future that seemed set. But I wasn't happy. The work was boring, the politics were draining, and I felt like I was just another cog in the machine. At first, I brushed it off as just a phase, but as time went on, I realized I was deeply unsatisfied. One afternoon, I was at a coffee shop, chatting with my friend Emma. She was one of those people who had a knack for making things happen. While I was stuck in my corporate rut, she was out there traveling the world, starting businesses, and living life on her own terms. It wasn't like she was super rich, but she always had this aura of freedom that I envied. We were discussing work, and as usual, I was complaining about my job. She listened for a while before dropping the bomb. You could quit. You could start your own business. You're just too scared to take the plunge. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been dreaming of escaping the 9-to-5 grind for years, but was too scared to actually do anything about it. I always came up with reasons not to take the leap. I don't have enough money, I don't know enough, or what if it fails? But that day, for some reason, I didn't just brush off her advice. I went home and started thinking. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The worst thing that could happen was failure, and I had already failed at being happy in my current job. That's when I made the decision. I was going to quit. I didn't jump in head first. No, that would have been reckless. I started researching. I looked into what kind of business would fit my skills and interests. After some deep reflection, I landed on the idea of starting a digital marketing agency. I had been in the marketing field for a few years and realized that most small businesses were terrible at online marketing. They either didn't know how to navigate the digital landscape or didn't have the time to do it themselves. That's where I could step in. I spent weeks planning. I created a business plan, saved up some money, and started building my online presence. I figured I'd start small, offering my services to local businesses and expanding as I went. The first month was brutal. I didn't have any clients, and I was constantly second-guessing myself. I had no idea what I was doing, but I wasn't about to give up. Then, a breakthrough came. I had been networking online and connecting with local business owners. One day, I received an email from a small coffee shop that had found my website. They were struggling to get customers through the door and wanted my help with their digital marketing. I was ecstatic. It was my first official client. I jumped into the project with everything I had. I researched their target market, created a content strategy, and ran their first paid campaign. After a month, their foot traffic increased by 25%. They were thrilled, and I was hooked. I realized this was what I was meant to do. I loved the process of helping businesses grow and seeing the tangible results of my work. Word of mouth spread, and soon, I had more clients. I took on more projects and built my portfolio. My business grew slowly but steadily, and after a year, I was able to quit my day job. It wasn't easy, and there were countless sleepless nights. I had to learn everything from scratch: how to handle finances, how to manage clients, how to scale a business. But every step, even the mistakes, taught me something valuable. By the second year, I had hired my first employee, a graphic designer, to help with the growing workload. I learned how to delegate tasks, manage a team, and ensure the quality of our services. The business was booming, and I was loving every minute of it. However, growth brought new challenges. As we gained more clients, I realized that I needed to keep improving my systems and processes to maintain quality. I invested in software to streamline workflows, and I started networking with other entrepreneurs to learn from their experiences. I joined mastermind groups and attended conferences, constantly looking for ways to level up. At the same time, I was still learning how to balance my personal life. The hustle of entrepreneurship can be all-consuming, and I had to remind myself to take breaks, spend time with family, and enjoy the little things. There were times when I felt burned out, but I always kept my vision clear. I was building something bigger than myself. I was creating a legacy, not just a job. Fast forward to today, and my business is thriving. We've expanded to working with clients in multiple industries, from healthcare to e-commerce, and our team has grown to 10 people. We've helped dozens of small businesses achieve success, and we're constantly innovating. I'm no longer just an employee, I'm the boss, and it feels incredible. But the journey hasn't been without its hardships. There have been moments of doubt, failure, and setbacks. There have been clients who didn't pay on time, projects that didn't go as planned, and financial crises that almost wiped us out. But through it all, I've learned that persistence is key. Success doesn't come overnight. It takes hard work, resilience, and a willingness to keep going when everything seems impossible. Looking back, I'm grateful for that coffee shop conversation with Emma. If she hadn't pushed me to take the leap, I might still be stuck in that corporate job, feeling unfulfilled. Entrepreneurship isn't easy, but for me, it's been the most rewarding journey of my life. I wake up every day excited about what's next, and I know that the best is yet to come. So, if you're reading this and wondering whether you should take the leap, do it. There will never be a perfect time, and the fear will never go away. But the satisfaction of building something from the ground up is worth it. If I can do it, so can you. The key is to start. Take that first step, no matter how small it is. You've got this. I was 26, living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, working a dead-end job at a tech support call center. It was an exhausting routine. I woke up at 7 a.m., barely managed to make myself breakfast, and then spent 8 hours answering calls from angry customers. By the time I got home, I was too tired to do anything other than order takeout, scroll through social media, and go to bed. The dream of becoming a successful entrepreneur was always in the back of my mind, but I had no idea how to make it happen. I didn't have the connections, the money, or even the confidence. It was late one Thursday night, as I was scrolling through Twitter, that I came across a post from a guy I followed. Let's call him Sam. He was talking about how he had started his own online business, selling custom t-shirts, and was now making 6 figures. I hadn't even thought of the t-shirt business before. I started digging into Sam's journey, reading his tweets, blog posts, and watching the videos he shared. The more I read, the more it hit me. This was something I could do. I loved graphic design, and while I wasn't a professional, I had a decent eye for creating cool, unique designs. I already had the basic skills to make something special, and the barrier to entry seemed incredibly low. I didn't need a factory or even a physical product, just a website, a printer, and a platform to sell through. It seemed like something I could do on the side, in my spare time, while still working my regular job. The more I thought about it, the more excited I got. The next morning, I went straight to work researching how to start a print-on-demand business. I found a platform called Printful, which partnered with companies that fulfilled and shipped custom products, so I didn't need to worry about inventory or logistics. I could create designs, upload them, and sell them through an online store, and Printful would handle the rest. I also started looking into how to create an online store. Shopify seemed like a good option, so I signed up for a 14-day free trial. But there was a huge problem. I didn't have any money to invest. The thought of putting my hard-earned savings into something that might fail terrified me. My bank account was barely enough to cover rent and food, let alone extra expenses like setting up a website, paying for designs, or running ads. So, I did what I had to do. I sold some of my old electronics, my Xbox, an old camera, and a few other things I didn't use anymore. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was enough to get me started. The first few days were spent designing. I wasn't trying to create masterpieces, just simple, catchy designs that could appeal to a specific audience. I made a few based on popular memes, some with funny quotes, and a few graphic t-shirts with minimalist designs. I didn't know if they would sell, but I was hopeful. Once I had a few designs ready, I uploaded them to Printful and connected them to my Shopify store. I spent a few hours setting up the store, tweaking the layout, and making sure everything was easy to navigate. I launched it with just 5 t-shirt designs. It was minimal, but it was a start. Next, I turned my focus to marketing. I didn't have much to spend on ads, so I had to be creative. I knew social media was key. I created Instagram and TikTok accounts for the brand and started posting content every day. At first, it was just me showing off the shirts and posting behind-the-scenes content of me designing. I even made a few funny videos to try and get some attention. The first few weeks were slow. I had no sales. Not a single order. It was discouraging. I felt like I had wasted my time and money. But then something happened. A video I posted on TikTok went viral. It wasn't even anything special, just me showing off a shirt with a funny design. But for some reason, people loved it. It got shared hundreds of times, and I started getting messages from people asking where they could buy it. I immediately directed them to my store. In the next few days, I made my first sale. Then another, and another. The trickle of orders turned into a steady stream, and soon I was making a few $100s a week. It wasn't enough to quit my job, but it was enough to get me excited. I reinvested every penny back into the business, running ads, designing new products, and improving my website. As I got more sales, I started to learn more about marketing, SEO, and how to optimize my store. I reached out to influencers in my niche, offering them free shirts in exchange for promoting my brand. Some said yes, and their posts sent more traffic to my store. Slowly but surely, my brand was gaining traction. After a few months, I decided to quit my day job. I wasn't making a fortune, but I had enough sales to live on. I moved into a better apartment, upgraded my equipment, and focused full-time on growing my business. I started expanding my product range, offering hoodies, mugs, and even phone cases. My designs were getting better, and I learned how to target specific customer demographics with more precision. I also built an email list and began to nurture my customers, offering them discounts and promotions. As my business grew, I hired a few people to help me out. A graphic designer to create new designs, a marketing assistant to manage ads and outreach, and a fulfillment manager to help me with customer service and logistics. With a small team, we were able to scale quickly. I started making thousands of dollars a month, and eventually, I hit my first $100,000 in revenue. Looking back, the journey was anything but easy. There were countless late nights, mistakes, and setbacks. But the key was that I never gave up. I stayed consistent, kept learning, and reinvested every bit of profit into growing my brand. There were times when I doubted myself, but I always reminded myself of why I started. I wanted something more than just a 9-to-5 job. I wanted to create something that was mine, something that could give me the freedom to live life on my own terms. Today, my brand is doing well. I've expanded into multiple product categories, and I've built a loyal customer base. It's not just about the money anymore, though, of course. That's a nice perk. It's about the satisfaction of creating something from nothing and seeing it grow. The feeling of waking up every morning, excited to work on my business, is something I never thought I'd experience. I'm still learning, still growing, but I'm proud of how far I've come. If I could give any advice to someone who's just starting out, it would be this. Don't be afraid to take that first step, even if you don't have everything figured out. The journey is long, and there will be obstacles, but every mistake and setback is a learning experience. Trust the process, and don't give up. I've always been the kind of person who loved a good challenge, but I didn't expect that the biggest one of my life would come in the form of building my own business from scratch. Let me take you back to how it all started. It was 2015, and I was working at a small tech startup in Silicon Valley. The company was growing rapidly, and I was in charge of managing several important projects. Everything seemed like it was on track for me to climb the corporate ladder, but something felt off. It wasn't that I hated my job. It was just that I had this nagging feeling that there was something more I could be doing. Every time I walked into the office, I couldn't help but feel like I was just another cog in a massive machine. There was no creative outlet, no sense of ownership, no freedom to truly execute on my ideas. That was when the idea for my own business first crept into my mind. I'd always been fascinated by technology, particularly how it could be used to solve real-world problems. I noticed that there was a growing demand for eco-friendly products, but not enough companies were making it accessible to the average consumer. I saw an opportunity to create a business that would offer sustainable products that were both high quality and affordable. I spent nights reading up on business strategies, supply chains, and how to get a product to market. The more I learned, the more excited I became. But there was one massive obstacle standing in my way. I had no money. I had a decent job, but I wasn't exactly raking in enough to launch a startup. I couldn't even afford to hire a team, let alone rent office space. On top of that, I had absolutely no experience in running a business. The idea of quitting my job and diving headfirst into entrepreneurship felt like a huge gamble, but I knew that if I didn't take the leap now, I would regret it for the rest of my life. After months of planning, I made the decision to quit my job. I didn't tell anyone at first, just a few close friends who I trusted. My family was shocked. They thought I was crazy to leave a stable job in one of the most lucrative industries in the world. My mom, especially, was not happy. She kept asking, "Why would you give up all of this for some wild idea? You're giving up security." But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the right move for me. So I made the jump, with only a few $1,000s saved up and a ton of determination. The first few months were rough. I didn't have a product yet, just an idea. I spent all my time contacting manufacturers, pitching my vision to anyone who would listen, and trying to find suppliers who could produce eco-friendly goods at a reasonable cost. I was rejected more times than I could count, and every no felt like a punch to the gut. But I kept going. I couldn't afford to fail. Eventually, I found a supplier who believed in my vision and was willing to work with me. We spent months perfecting the product, sourcing the right materials, and making sure everything was up to my standards. Once the product was finally ready, it was time to launch. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew that I had to start somewhere. So, I built a website, set up social media accounts, and poured every last penny I had into digital ads. The first few weeks were painfully slow. I made a couple of sales, but nothing significant. I was starting to wonder if I had made a huge mistake. But then, something incredible happened. A popular influencer on Instagram, someone I had never heard of before, posted a picture of my product. The next day, my website crashed from the influx of traffic. I couldn't believe it. Sales were pouring in faster than I could keep up. I was finally seeing the fruits of my labor. That moment changed everything. I realized that people wanted my product and that there was a market for what I was offering. But it didn't stop there. I had to keep innovating and finding new ways to connect with my customers. I began to build a community around my brand, reaching out to customers personally, asking for feedback, and making them feel like they were part of something bigger. Slowly but surely, my business started to grow. Over the next 2 years, my company gained traction. We expanded our product line, started working with more influencers, and invested heavily in advertising. I hired a small team of dedicated employees, and we began to scale. I learned how to manage inventory, deal with customer service, and navigate the complexities of shipping and logistics. I was doing everything from product development to marketing, and it felt overwhelming at times, but I never lost sight of the goal. In 2018, I hit a major milestone. My company was profitable. I had finally turned a profit, and it felt surreal. I remember sitting in my office one night, looking at the numbers and thinking to myself, I did it. I really did it. The next challenge was how to keep that momentum going. I was no longer the underdog. I was now a player in the game, and there was a lot more pressure to succeed. That year, I also made a decision that would change my life forever. I decided to expand internationally. It was a massive risk, but it was also the natural next step if I wanted to grow the business. I spent months researching different markets, figuring out the best way to enter them, and making sure that our product was well received. It wasn't easy, and there were a lot of bumps along the way, but in the end, it paid off. Our products reached new customers across the globe, and our sales skyrocketed. By 2020, my company had grown into a thriving global brand. We were in several countries, had hundreds of employees, and had made a name for ourselves in the sustainable product market. I had gone from a person with a wild idea and a dream to the CEO of a successful business, and all of it had been built from the ground up. But despite the success, the journey hasn't been without its challenges. There have been moments of self-doubt, sleepless nights, and periods of intense stress. I've had to make hard decisions, and at times, I've felt like giving up. But when I look back on everything I've accomplished, I know that I made the right choice. The struggle has been worth it. If there's one thing I've learned through this entire journey, it's that success doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of hard work, perseverance, and the willingness to take risks. If you're reading this and you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment. There's never going to be a perfect time. The key is to start, learn from your mistakes, and keep going. The road will be tough, but if you stick with it, the rewards are worth it. So, if you're dreaming of building your own business, take it from me, start now. Your future self will thank you. I still remember the day I took the leap. It was the first week of November, and I was standing in my small, cramped office cubicle staring at the stack of papers in front of me. My computer screen flickered in a low hum. I was supposed to be working on a quarterly report, but my mind was elsewhere. I was 30 years old, had a steady job with a comfortable salary, and was on track to get promoted in the next year or two. But none of that mattered anymore. The feeling in my gut told me I was done with the corporate life. For years, I had been dreaming of starting my own business. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. My parents were hardworking immigrants, and they taught me the importance of stability and the security of a regular paycheck. But despite their advice, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was destined for something bigger, something different. I had started small. I'd been dabbling in e-commerce on the side for a few years, selling random things like phone cases and fashion accessories. The income wasn't much, barely enough to cover my grocery bills, but it was enough to keep the fire burning. Every sale I made was like a little victory. Every time I packaged an order, I felt a rush of excitement. I was building something, even if it was tiny. But I wasn't ready to quit my job. Not yet. I kept telling myself that I needed more time, more money, more confidence. The problem was, I was always waiting for the perfect moment to jump. But there is no such thing as the perfect moment. That was the day I realized I had to make a choice. Either I could keep waiting, getting older and more resentful with each passing year, or I could take a risk and go all in. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I thought about quitting my job. But then I thought about my future, about the dreams I'd put on hold for so long. I couldn't let fear stop me anymore. I spent the next few days doing what I should have done months earlier. I started planning. I went over my e-commerce business, identified the areas I was doing well, and pinpointed where I needed to improve. I started saving up as much as I could from my paycheck to prepare for the inevitable financial uncertainty. The more I looked into the numbers, the more I realized I could do this. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. On December 1st, I handed in my resignation letter. It was a bittersweet moment. The company had been good to me, and I had a lot of friends there. I was well-liked, and I knew people would be shocked when they heard the news. But at the same time, I felt a sense of relief. I was free. For the first time in years, I felt the weight on my shoulders lift, and the world seemed a little brighter. I dove headfirst into my e-commerce business. I spent countless hours working late into the night, tweaking my website, optimizing my listings, researching competitors, and learning about online marketing. I invested in ads, but I also relied heavily on organic growth through social media. I connected with influencers in my niche and started getting some traction. My sales started picking up, but it wasn't enough to make a living. I made plenty of mistakes along the way, but I learned from every single one. There was the time I accidentally ordered 500 units of a product that no one wanted. I lost thousands of dollars on that mistake, but it taught me a valuable lesson. Know your market inside and out. I also ran Facebook ads that burned through my budget with little to no return. But instead of giving up, I researched better targeting and optimized my campaigns. During the first few months, I made less than I had at my old job. I was barely scraping by, living off of instant noodles and skipping meals to save money. But I knew I had to keep going. Every setback was just part of the process. I kept reminding myself that the road to success was filled with failure, and if I wanted to make it, I had to embrace the struggle. Then came the turning point. In May, one of my social media posts went viral. I was featuring a new product, a trendy, eco-friendly item that I had spent weeks researching. The influencers I partnered with started sharing it, and soon, my website traffic exploded. Sales came in faster than I could process them. My website crashed multiple times because of the influx of visitors. I had no idea how to handle the volume, but I didn't care. This was the break I'd been waiting for. By the end of that month, I had made more in sales than I had in the previous 6 months combined. My phone kept buzzing with notifications, and for the first time since I started this journey, I felt like I was truly onto something. I hired a few part-time employees to help with order fulfillment and customer service, and I focused on scaling my operations. But success didn't happen overnight. For every win, there was a failure lurking in the background. I quickly realized that being an entrepreneur meant I had to wear many hats. I had to be the marketer, the financial analyst, the product manager, and the customer service rep. Every day presented a new challenge, but each challenge brought me closer to my goal. One of the hardest things was learning how to balance the long hours with my personal life. I was single at the time, but I knew if I didn't set boundaries, I'd lose everything. I started scheduling personal time for myself, something I hadn't done in years. I took weekends off and spent time with friends and family. I even took up hiking, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. In the second year of my business, things started to really take off. I had expanded my product line, increased my ad budget, and invested in improving my customer experience. I even got featured in a few online publications, which gave me even more credibility. I started making enough money to pay myself a salary, and I was finally able to take a few trips to relax. But success didn't stop at that point. I continued working hard, constantly pushing the boundaries of what was possible. I knew that if I stopped, I would risk losing everything. So I kept innovating, tweaking, and testing new strategies. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. From that small office cubicle to running a 7-figure business. There were times when I wanted to give up, when I felt like it would never work. But I never let those moments define me. Instead, I used them as fuel to keep going. I've learned that entrepreneurship isn't for the faint of heart. It's a constant battle of overcoming obstacles, learning from failures, and pushing yourself beyond what you thought was possible. But when you push through, when you keep going despite the setbacks, the rewards are worth it. And now, as I sit in my own office overlooking the city, I'm grateful I took that leap. If you're reading this and you're on the fence about pursuing your dream, my advice is simple: take the leap. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but the journey is worth every minute. You'll fail, you'll struggle, but one day, you'll look back and realize you've built something incredible. I've always been the type of person who didn't like taking the easy route, but I didn't realize how deeply that instinct would shape my entrepreneurial journey until years later. It all started back when I was in my mid-20s. I was working as a software engineer at a promising tech company, living the dream life, or at least that's what everyone around me thought. I had a steady paycheck, a company car, health insurance, and even stock options. But something felt off. Every morning, I'd wake up, grab my coffee, and head into the office, where I would spend hours in front of a screen building software that, in my opinion, lacked real-world impact. Sure, it paid the bills, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant to do something bigger. I wanted to create something that could help people on a massive scale, not just make the next corporate partner more profitable. It wasn't long before I started brainstorming ideas for my own venture. I wanted to build a product that combined my technical skills with my deep interest in solving everyday problems. I didn't want to just make a new app or platform, though. I wanted to make something that could truly change lives. After months of thinking and testing ideas, I came across an issue that had been bothering me for years: the lack of a comprehensive solution for remote work collaboration. This was back in 2016, a few years before remote work became the standard for many industries. I realized that, while there were tools like Slack, Zoom, and Google Drive, none of them fully addressed the needs of remote teams in a way that was simple, intuitive, and integrated. I wanted to create a platform that would bring remote work to life, combining chat, project management, video calls, and file sharing into one cohesive tool. After all, if remote work was going to be the future, it needed to be seamless. The idea was clear, but turning it into a reality was a whole different ballgame. I didn't have any savings to fall back on. The tech company I worked for paid me well, but I had lived pretty frugally up until that point. I had a small apartment, no real investments, and no business network. I knew that if I wanted to make this work, I would need to hustle hard. I began working on the project at night after my day job. The first few months were brutal. I coded for hours, then fell asleep for a couple of hours before heading to work again. I learned quickly that building an app from scratch was far more complicated than I had imagined. Every time I thought I had solved one problem, 5 new ones popped up. But I was determined to make it work. There were times when I wanted to quit. One night, after hitting a particularly tough wall, I thought about giving up. I'd poured everything I had into this idea, my time, energy, and even my sense of self. But I didn't want to go back to the corporate grind. I didn't want to give up on the dream of creating something that would matter. So, I pushed through. By the time I finally launched the beta version of the app, it was already late 2017. I had a small group of friends and colleagues testing it, and the feedback was promising, but not overwhelming. It was clear that the platform had potential, but it wasn't quite there yet. At that point, I knew I needed to either double down or walk away. I chose to double down. I quit my job, despite having little savings to rely on. I didn't tell my parents or friends about it. I knew they would be worried. The fear of failure was real, but I pushed that fear to the back of my mind. It was time to scale up. I hired a small team of developers and designers, people who shared my vision and were willing to work for stock options rather than salary. The next few months were a whirlwind of coding, designing, and refining. There were countless all-nighters, missed meals, and moments of self-doubt. But we kept pushing forward, inching closer to the product I knew could make a difference. After a year of blood, sweat, and tears, we were ready to launch. We didn't have a massive marketing budget, so we relied on word of mouth, social media, and reaching out directly to companies that were using remote teams. At first, it was slow. We didn't go viral overnight, and the growth wasn't as explosive as I had hoped. But what we did have was a loyal user base that believed in what we were doing. The first big break came when a well-known startup in the tech industry signed up for the platform. They were looking for a better remote work solution, and after using our platform for a month, they signed a long-term contract. That deal gave us the financial stability to hire more developers, improve our product, and begin marketing more aggressively. Over the next few years, we continued to grow. Our platform became more refined, with new features being added regularly based on user feedback. We expanded our team, raised a round of funding, and gained traction in the industry. But despite the growth, I still couldn't shake the feeling that we were only scratching the surface of what was possible. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, the demand for remote work tools exploded. Suddenly, companies that had previously resisted the idea of remote work were forced to embrace it. Our platform became a lifeline for many of them. We saw exponential growth, and what was once a small startup began to scale rapidly. By the end of 2021, we had secured partnerships with major companies, and our user base had grown to millions. But success came with its own set of challenges. As we grew, the pressure to maintain quality, innovate, and stay ahead of competitors became overwhelming. I found myself constantly balancing between leading the company and staying true to the vision I had when I started. I had to learn how to delegate, trust my team, and let go of the hands-on approach that had worked in the early days. Looking back, I realized that entrepreneurship wasn't just about the idea or the product. It was about resilience, adaptability, and the willingness to keep going when everything seemed impossible. There were plenty of moments where failure seemed imminent, but the key was never giving up. Now, as I sit in the office that I once dreamed of having, looking out over the city, I sometimes wonder if I would have taken the plunge if I knew how hard the journey would be. But in the end, it was worth it. Not just for the financial success or the recognition, but for the satisfaction of knowing that I created something that has impacted millions of people. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone thinking of starting their own business, it would be this: stay focused on your vision, but don't be afraid to adapt. And never, ever give up, no matter how hard it gets. The path may be difficult, but the rewards, both personal and professional, are worth every sacrifice. I grew up in a small town, and as far back as I can remember, my family struggled financially. My dad worked as a mechanic at a local shop, and my mom worked 2 part-time jobs just to make ends meet. We didn't have much, but I always admired my parents' resilience. They were the type of people who believed that with enough hard work, anything was possible. That mindset was something I carried with me into adulthood, even though I didn't always know what I wanted to do with it. After high school, I attended a local community college, but I quickly realized that the traditional path wasn't for me. I hated the routine of classes, exams, and textbooks. What I really wanted was to break free from the daily grind and build something of my own. But what? I had no clear vision at the time, and to be honest, I felt completely lost. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon an ad for an online course on digital marketing. The ad claimed you could learn how to create your own online business, make passive income, and live the life of your dreams, all from the comfort of your home. I had no idea what digital marketing even was, but something about it grabbed my attention. I was skeptical, but curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the link. The course wasn't cheap, at least not for someone with my limited budget, but I felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. I had nothing to lose. I used my last bit of savings to buy the course, and the moment I hit purchase, I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. I wasn't entirely sure what I had signed myself up for, but I knew I needed to go all in. The first few weeks were overwhelming. There was so much jargon and unfamiliar territory: SEO, Google Ads, landing pages, affiliate marketing. I was completely out of my depth, and every day I thought about quitting. But I remembered my parents' work ethic, and I pushed through. Slowly, it started to make sense. I began understanding how to create websites, how to drive traffic, and how to market products. It wasn't easy, but with each small victory, my confidence grew. A couple of months into the course, I had built my first website, a blog about fitness. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. I started posting content regularly, and eventually, I added affiliate links to products I believed in. At first, nothing happened. I was getting no traffic, and no one was clicking on my links. I felt like I had wasted my time. But then, one morning, I checked my email and saw a notification from Amazon. Someone had bought a product through one of my affiliate links. I had made my first sale. It was a small commission, but to me, it felt like a huge win. That $5.27 felt like a lifeline, a sign that I was on the right path. I could do this. From there, I doubled down. I learned more about SEO, refined my content, and started experimenting with paid ads. I also diversified my revenue streams, adding ebooks, online courses, and even merchandise. My first year was rough. There were countless late nights, moments of doubt, and more failures than I care to admit. But I kept going. The small wins kept adding up, and little by little, my income grew. Fast forward a year, and I was making enough money to quit my part-time job and focus on my business full-time. I remember the day I handed in my resignation. It felt surreal, like I had just crossed some imaginary threshold that separated the dreamers from the doers. But even though I was living my dream, it wasn't without its challenges. The pressure to keep up with trends, manage multiple income streams, and deal with customer service inquiries was exhausting. Some days I felt overwhelmed, like I was in over my head. That's when I decided to hire help. It wasn't easy to let go of some responsibilities, but I knew I couldn't scale the business on my own. I hired a part-time virtual assistant to help with customer service and a freelance writer to assist with blog posts. Slowly, my team grew, and so did my business. We expanded into new niches, launched new products, and started building an email list that grew exponentially. But even as my income steadily increased, I still had moments where I questioned if I was doing it right. I had friends who worked 9 to 5 jobs, making stable salaries, while I was constantly chasing the next big idea. There were days when it felt like the pressure was unbearable, when I wondered if it was all worth it. Would I burn out? Was I missing out on something more secure? Then, one day, I received an email from a woman who had been following my blog for a while. She wrote that she had started her own online business after reading one of my articles and that she had quit her job to pursue her passion. She thanked me for the guidance I had provided, saying that my story had inspired her to take the leap. That email hit me like a ton of bricks. I realized that what I had built wasn't just a business. It was a platform where I could share my journey and help others take their own leap of faith. In that moment, I knew my purpose had shifted. It wasn't just about making money anymore. It was about making a difference. Since then, my business has continued to grow. I've launched courses, written books, and even spoken at events. I've been able to give back by mentoring others who are looking to start their own online businesses. And while the challenges haven't stopped, I've learned to embrace them, knowing that each obstacle is an opportunity to grow. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. The kid who used to wonder how he was ever going to make it out of that small town is now living a life he once thought was impossible. My journey wasn't smooth, and it wasn't fast. But the key was persistence. I kept going, even when it seemed like nothing was working. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that success doesn't happen overnight. It's about making small, consistent improvements, learning from your mistakes, and, most importantly, never giving up. So, to anyone out there who's feeling stuck or uncertain, keep going. You're closer than you think. The road might be tough, but every step forward is progress. The life you're dreaming of is within reach. Just don't stop. When I was growing up, I didn't know what an entrepreneur was. My parents were hardworking immigrants, and they believed in the traditional path: get a degree, land a steady job, and work your way up the ladder. I always admired their resilience, but deep down, I knew I was different. I had this urge to create, to innovate, and to do something that would make a mark on the world. My first real exposure to business came in high school. I wasn't the best student academically, but I was good at spotting opportunities. During lunch breaks, I started noticing a pattern. Everyone had snacks, but no one ever had enough of what they really wanted. So, I started selling homemade sandwiches, chips, and sodas in the school parking lot. It was simple, but it worked. I was making enough money to buy extra video games, and that was all that mattered at the time. Fast forward to college. I was studying marketing, and even though my grades weren't great, I knew that the business world was where I wanted to be. I was also broke, so I had to hustle to survive. One day, I walked into a local coffee shop and noticed they didn't have Wi-Fi. In 2015, that felt like a huge gap in the market. Students and remote workers needed a place to work outside of their dorms or homes, and a coffee shop was the perfect setting for it. I pitched the idea of installing Wi-Fi for free, and the owner agreed, after I convinced him it would draw more customers. Within a few months, the shop became the go-to spot for everyone in town who needed a place to work. I was getting $5 for every coffee I bought and still had time to study. That's when I realized that business wasn't just about what you sold, it was about creating value. However, I wanted more. I had bigger dreams. I was working part-time at a marketing firm, and the idea of launching my own business kept me up at night. It wasn't just about making money. I wanted to build something that could impact others. I started reading books about business, watching podcasts, and attending networking events, hoping to catch a break. The breakthrough came one night while I was scrolling through social media. I came across a post from a fitness influencer promoting a brand new supplement company. I was intrigued but skeptical. The supplements were all the same. Everyone was trying to sell the same thing, just with different packaging. But something clicked. If the market was flooded with products that were essentially the same, then the difference had to be in the branding and customer experience. That's when the idea for my first real business came to me, a supplement company with a focus on mental health and wellness. I spent the next few months creating a brand around the idea of mental clarity and mental health. I wanted it to be more than just a supplement. I wanted it to be a movement. I started developing products with natural ingredients, something that would set us apart from the mass-produced, chemical-laden alternatives on the market. It was a huge risk, and I put every penny I had into creating the website and sourcing the raw materials. The first few months were a blur. I was working 18-hour days, managing everything myself: marketing, logistics, product development, customer service. I was barely sleeping, but I was excited. The hardest part was convincing people to trust my brand. Mental health was still a taboo topic at the time, and selling something like supplements to improve focus, energy, and clarity felt like a gamble. But I had faith in my product, and I believed in the mission. Slowly but surely, sales started rolling in. I remember the first time I saw a customer leave a review, praising how my product helped them with their focus during exams. That was when it all clicked. I wasn't just selling a product, I was helping people. I was making a difference. But success wasn't immediate. There were months where I couldn't pay myself, and I had to borrow money from friends and family to keep the business afloat. I remember one night being so stressed out, sitting on the floor of my apartment with a pile of bills in front of me, wondering if I should just give up. But I couldn't. I had come too far to quit now. I kept pushing forward, constantly refining my products, making my marketing more targeted, and finding new ways to engage with my customers. I started using social media influencers to promote my brand, and that was a game changer. These influencers were real people with authentic stories, and their followers trusted them. The brand started gaining traction, and slowly but surely, sales grew. By year 2, I had made enough money to hire a small team, and we started expanding our product line. But it wasn't smooth sailing. As we grew, we faced new challenges. We had supply chain issues, product recalls, and competition that came out of nowhere, copying our formula and undercutting our prices. I had to get creative to stay ahead of the curve. We started offering loyalty programs, running giveaways, and partnering with fitness trainers to host events. The business continued to grow, and I eventually reached a point where I was making enough money to live comfortably and scale the brand. The feeling of watching something you created from nothing turn into a thriving business is indescribable. But it wasn't just the money or the success that mattered. It was the impact we were making on people's lives. Years later, looking back on that first coffee shop and my journey, I realized how much I had learned and how far I had come. I had no formal training, no financial backing, and no clear roadmap. All I had was a drive to make something happen and a willingness to learn from my mistakes. In the end, I didn't just become a successful entrepreneur. I became someone who was proud of what they had built, not just for themselves, but for the people who had believed in the vision. Now, I'm at a point where my company is thriving. We've expanded internationally, and our products are in stores across the country. But the journey is far from over. There are still more challenges ahead, and I'm still learning every day. But I've learned that success isn't just about hitting milestones. It's about embracing the journey, staying true to your values, and never giving up, no matter how hard it gets. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you don't need to be perfect to succeed. You just need to keep moving forward, one step at a time. There are no shortcuts, no guarantees, but with enough hustle and perseverance, you can make anything happen. The only thing standing between you and your dream is the decision to go for it. So, if you're sitting there wondering if it's possible, take that first step. You'll figure the rest out along the way. I still remember the moment when my whole life changed, but it didn't feel like a breakthrough at the time. It was more like a quiet realization that I had to take a risk if I ever wanted to escape the cycle of mediocrity. Let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in a small, sleepy town where everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. My family wasn't poor, but we weren't wealthy either. We were solidly middle class, which meant we had enough to get by, but not enough to make a lot of noise. I went to a public school where everyone seemed to be going through the motions: graduate, go to college, get a job, get married, buy a house, and repeat the cycle. But from an early age, I knew I didn't want that. I was a teenager when I first started reading books about entrepreneurs. The usual suspects: Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Richard Branson. Their stories captivated me. But the more I read, the more I realized that they all had something in common. They took risks. The world didn't hand them opportunities on silver platters. They had to create those opportunities, and they often had to fight to keep them. This idea of creating your own path became a mantra for me. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to settle for just another safe job. By the time I finished high school, I was certain I was going to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't have a clue how to make that happen. My parents wanted me to go to college. They were big on education, believing that a degree was the golden ticket. I, on the other hand, wanted to build something from the ground up, and I knew that college wasn't the path that would get me there. I made the bold decision to drop out after my first year. My parents were furious, but they couldn't change my mind. I didn't want to sit in lecture halls memorizing facts that I didn't care about when I could be out there building something real. I was lucky enough to have a small inheritance from my grandmother, which I used to fund my first business. My first venture was an e-commerce website. It was 2012, and I had just turned 19. I had an idea to sell custom-made phone cases with unique designs. I spent months researching suppliers, creating a website, and building an online store. It was my first taste of entrepreneurship, and I was obsessed. But there was a problem: nobody was buying. I had a beautiful website, great designs, and competitive prices, but no traffic. I didn't know anything about marketing. I had no understanding of SEO, social media, or digital advertising. My sales were dismal. I didn't give up, though. I kept trying different things, trying to learn from my failures. After months of frustration, I finally figured out that my issue wasn't the product, it was visibility. I needed to get the word out. I threw myself into learning about online marketing. I devoured articles and watched YouTube tutorials on SEO, Google Ads, Instagram marketing, anything that could drive traffic to my site. Slowly but surely, I started to see the numbers change. Visitors were coming to the site, and a few started making purchases. I wasn't making a fortune, but I was making something, and that felt like a small victory. But then, just as I was beginning to feel a little more confident, the unexpected happened. A major competitor entered the market. They had a bigger budget, a larger team, and better resources. My sales plummeted. It felt like the end of the world. I had invested everything into this venture, and I was watching it collapse. I had a choice to make: walk away or pivot. And this time, I didn't give up. I learned that to succeed in business, you have to be adaptable. I pivoted my business model. Instead of selling just phone cases, I expanded to custom accessories for other products, including laptop bags, headphones, and even custom clothing. It was a gamble, but it paid off. I used the marketing tactics I had learned and doubled down on social media. I collaborated with influencers, ran paid ads, and started offering limited edition designs to create a sense of urgency. Slowly, my brand gained traction. What had once been a small hobby turned into a full-time business. But this story doesn't end there. After a few years of steady growth, I realized that I had reached a plateau. I had a loyal customer base, but the market was saturated, and I didn't know how to scale. I had hit a wall. That's when I had another life-changing epiphany. My business needed to evolve once again. I decided to take a step back and think bigger. I wanted to create a platform for other entrepreneurs like myself, a place where people could launch their own e-commerce stores without needing to have technical skills. I spent the next year developing a SaaS, software as a service, platform that would allow others to create customizable online stores for their own products. Launching the platform was another gamble. I poured almost everything I had left into it, and again, I was met with resistance. People didn't understand what I was offering. I had to educate the market on how my platform could help them. This time, however, I had a strong marketing foundation to lean on. I used the same tactics that had worked before, but this time, I was offering something truly valuable. The SaaS platform took off faster than I ever expected. By this time, I had learned to scale my marketing efforts, and with more customers signing up, I was able to hire a team of talented people who could help take the company to the next level. In just a few years, the platform became one of the top tools in the industry, and I was living a life I never imagined as a teenager in that small town. Now, years later, I look back at my journey and I realize how far I've come. My businesses have gone from struggling in a crowded marketplace to thriving. And while I've made plenty of mistakes along the way, those mistakes are what have shaped my success. I didn't start with a perfect plan, and I certainly didn't have all the answers. What I had was a willingness to learn, adapt, and keep moving forward. I guess what I want to say to anyone reading this is simple. Entrepreneurship isn't easy, and there's no magic formula for success. It's about taking risks, learning from failure, and never giving up, even when it seems like everything is falling apart. I didn't have an idea that was going to change the world when I started. I just had a passion for creating, a willingness to learn, and a refusal to settle. If you have that same mindset, anything is possible. So to anyone who's thinking about starting their own business, take the leap. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it might not work at first. But I promise you, the lessons you'll learn along the way will be worth more than anything you could have imagined. Don't wait for the perfect time. The best time is now. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.